So I'm sure most of us know that stress is the number one cause for most chronic illnesses and diseases. But what causes stress? We might say it's our lifestyle. We might say it's certain situations, circumstances, people. But what if I told you that there is one single root to all the causes of stress? I'm David Pink, and I am a grandson of a bioenergetic healer. And as promised, today I'm going to go over the root cause of stress and what we can do to overcome it. When we are in a state of worry or anxiety or stress, what happens metaphysically is we siphon energy, rob energy from our own energy field, and use that energy to stress and worry. Because to stress and to worry requires a lot of energy. And basically, we are interrupting the flow or the body's innate mechanism and desire to create balance and harmony in the system, which is, as we all know, a recipe for disaster. But why do we stress? What is the root cause? Whenever we are stressed out about something, worrying about something, there is one common denominator. And that common denominator is non-acceptance. There's something that we are refusing to accept. We are resisting what is in some way, shape, or form. And it can be something as minor as waiting in line somewhere. We start stressing, right? And why are we stressing? Because we're waiting, because we don't want to be waiting. We're resisting the fact that we're waiting. So you might be thinking, okay, yeah, I see how that makes sense. Well, so what? Okay, what's the significance of that? Or some of you might be thinking, well, thank you, Captain Obvious. But this is very, very important to acknowledge and understand, because it is this very impulse to not accept what is happening or to resist things that causes our spiritual, psychological, emotional downfall. It is this very impulse to resist that does not allow us to experience the true beauty of life and the freedom of life and higher states of consciousness, which masters like Yeshua referred to as the kingdom of heaven, or as he spoke it in his native tongue of Aramaic, Malkuta Dishmaya, or as the Buddha termed Nirvana. Now these guys, they were experiencing the ultimate peak of non-resistance, of total acceptance. And that's why they were so blissed out and happy and at ease, and why everyone and their mother wanted to be around them. That state that they were in, that is low-key, so to speak, what we all long for inside ourselves. But there's something within us that distorts this desire and projects it as desiring things like power, money, status, and we believe that these things will bring us what we're looking for, that feeling of satisfaction and peace. But the truth is that those things will not. And I'm not saying that those things are bad. Those things are fine in their place. But when we put them on a pedestal and idolize them and believe that they will bring us that which we are actually seeking, that is complete ignorance of the truth of what we actually are desiring. I mean, if you just think about it for a second, 2,000 years later after Yeshua's passing, 2,500 years after Siddhartha's passing, the Buddha. And they're talked about more today than all the kings and emperors of the world who were alive much more recently than these guys. And these guys, these masters, Yeshua and the Buddha, they were not kings, they were not emperors, they were not wealthy. They were They were meek. That's why Yeshua said, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. That is actually a very deep and profound statement. It means that if someone makes themselves humble, everything that they need in life and more will gravitate towards them. And yet, most of us follow this desire to want to be like a king or an emperor. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is because there's something within us that deludes us into following this route, into distorting our actual desire for inner peace and harmony, and projecting these types of desires to want things to be our way. And this is ultimately how the emperors, for the most part, were. They wanted things to be their way, and they got things their way, and they didn't care who had to be killed or starved or whatever for their way to happen. And many of us, not to that extent, but we function in this way. We want things to be our way, and when things don't go our way, we're in resistance. We get angry, we get upset. There's something within us that persists to resist. And this something has gone by many names in many cultures over many generations. Today, it's infamously known as the ego. And the ego, according to one of the greatest masters alive at this time right now, that we are blessed to have in our midst, Eckhart Tolle, the author of this beautiful, amazing, profound book called The Power of Now. Hopefully, many of you watching and listening have read this book. And if you haven't, please do yourselves a favor and read it. And if you're more of an audio learner, definitely get the audio book. It's actually narrated by him, and he is an incredible narrator. He explains beautifully that the ego is basically like a parasite in our psyche, a psychic parasite, if you will, that sort of takes over our psyche and causes us to resist things so that we become agitated or irritated, frustrated, angry, anxious, worried, or stressed in some way, shape, or form. And this is something that's also known, for example, in Kabbalah or mystical Judaism as the Hasatan, which is where the word Satan came from. And Hasatan means your inner opponent. But in mystical Judaism, the qualities and characteristics of the Hasatan, or the ego, that are emphasized are the qualities and characteristics that make us not want to do spiritual things. For example, they say that when we should pray, that voice that comes up and says, you don't have time to pray right now. You got stuff to do. You got the email to answer. You got to take care of this thing, that thing. And that is definitely a quality of the ego or the Hasatan. Because from what I have come to understand about it, its job or its impulse and main objective is to get us to lower our vibration and to prevent us from raising our vibration, because it itself is negatively polarized and it cannot thrive or let alone survive if we start to become more positively polarized. It will begin to die. And like any living or parasitic entity, doesn't want to die, and it'll do anything and everything it can to survive. I'm sure some of you listening to this right now have heard of this, have heard of the ego or something along these lines. For those of you who have never heard of this, listening to this, you might think this is a little bit out there, a little bit wild, but I assure you that if you start to observe your own psyche when things happen that don't go according to your plan, or when you start stressing or worrying or getting irritated, I assure you that if you just pay attention, you will see that this is in fact so. And the earlier that you can catch it, the better. Because it doesn't just start right away with crazy anxiety or crazy irritation. That's already when it's taken you to that point. And by that point, it's a lot harder to become aware and observe. The observation is much easier and more effective is when you can catch it, as they say, nip it in the bud. Meaning as soon as frustration starts kicking in, just pay attention and notice what's going on right now. Why am I starting to get anxious? Why am I starting to get irritated? And you will see, it all began with some sort of inner commentary, some sort of chatter that is causing this irritation or this anxiety to start. Something as simple as, are you kidding me right now? That's it. That's the beginning. That's the first words of the Hasatan that starts to cause our blood pressure to rise. But the thing is, we don't know it as the Hasatan or the ego. We just think that that's us. But according to Eckhart Tolle and many other masters, including the Buddhists, they're very big on this as well, that is not who and what we are. That is a psychic parasite that has hijacked our consciousness and sort of hypnotized us in a way to believe that commentary, that's who and what we are. But according to Eckhart Tolle and many other masters, we are not this voice. And we actually have a much higher and much more divine nature that we are completely unaware of for the most part. And for most of us, I'm not speaking for everybody, but I'm definitely speaking for myself, because I'm sure that there are definitely a few people listening to me speak about this right now thinking, how does he know these things and he acts the way that he does sometimes? And it's because it's not easy. It's because it's not just, oh, you become aware of this and oh, that's it, you're free of the ego. It don't work that way. In fact, it works completely the other way, because once you start to become aware of it, the harder it works to stay gripped onto your consciousness. So taking on this endeavor of starting to become aware of the ego and striving to overcome it, this is the most difficult endeavor that a human being can go through. But you can start reaping the benefits right away, slowly, little by little, because every time you become aware of this inner mechanism, of this voice, this negative mental commentary, that very awareness begins to break the link between your true nature, your divine nature, and this Hasatan, this ego. And every time a link is broken, even if it's a small, tiny little link, the breaking of that little link gives us a feeling of relief, of inner peace. Even if it's just for a little bit, it's still peace, it's still a win. And that is precisely what Eckhart Tolle explains in his book, In the Power of Now, that is how we begin to break that link and start to know our true nature by becoming aware of this negative voice that resists things in our heads. Because this negative voice, this inner mechanism, the ego, it needs our cooperation in order to perpetuate itself. And he explains this as well, that this psychic parasite is in fact a psychic parasite. It's not even like a psychic parasite, it is a parasite. And like a parasite, it doesn't have its own life source. Just like a parasite, it needs a host, right? It needs a host in order to survive and to thrive. And our true nature, our divine nature, that's the host that it's latched the stuff onto, and it distorts and tricks into buying its narrative. And that true nature is what I have come to understand based on my studies is the soul. Because that's what we all are, essentially. We're all souls having a human experience. And part of having a human experience is taking on this Hasatan, is having this inner opponent, this ego, and testing ourselves to see if we can rise above it, to taste the splendor and the glory of that. And the soul is divine. It's a piece of God. It's a piece of source. The word soul comes from the word solar, which means light. And the more and more we become aware of the ego and its narrative and begin to break our identification with it, the more and more we will start to feel the light of our soul. And this, my friends, is how we allow our aura to start to become so expanded and so bright and vibrate so high that we enter into a whole new consciousness, into a whole new reality, in fact. And this reality is what Yeshua referred to as the kingdom of heaven and the Buddha referred to as nirvana, because in this reality, it in fact is the kingdom of heaven. Because in this reality, you are in such a vibration, in such a frequency, that negative energies around you have no effect on you whatsoever, because you're not even you're not vibrating close enough even for these energies to affect you in any way. It's two completely different densities. So like attracts like. Negative energy can only affect you if there's something within you that resonates with it. And that is why the ego works so hard to create resistance in ourselves. Because when we resist, when we stress, when we worry, when we get angry, our aura shrinks, becomes more dense, we become more susceptible to negative energy. And that's how the ego feeds, according to Eckhart Tolle as well. And when this happens, according to my grandfather, our aura shrinks and we become more susceptible to getting sick, because now our bodies are not nourished well enough by the energy that it needs. And when people get sick, that gives them all the more reason to complain. And complaining is another form of resistance, another win for the ego. It knows that if we don't resist, if we live in a state of non-resistance, we would vibrate too high and it would not get fed and it would die. So you see, it's all tied together. It's all tied together. The ego is very clever and very cunning. And this is also according to Eckhart Tolle. We have to become not more clever, not more cunning, but more vigilant, more aware, like Zen monks, like Zen masters. In fact, in Zen, this is their aim as well. That's why they practice so much meditation, to increase their awareness, because they're aware of something in our psyche that's not part of our true nature, which they call the Buddha nature. They call this the faux mind. It's the same thing. The ego mind, the faux mind, it's the same thing. So this is something that's known in many traditions and cultures. This has been part of the human experience and human predicament for a long, long time. But unfortunately, it's only been, this kind of information, this kind of knowledge has only been given to very few people in the form of esoterica. Literally every religion has an esoteric branch, if you will, that speaks of this, right? And I already mentioned Judaism and Buddhism. There's also Sufism and Islam. Sufism is all about transcending the ego. But now I feel that we're living in a time where this knowledge, this information is much more accessible. And there's a reason for that. It's because it's needed. It's needed desperately. So I hope that you enjoyed today's discussion. I hope that it blessed you in some way. May we all merit to strive and become more aware of what we are not, so that we can start to become aware of what we are. Divinity in form. Until next time, God bless.